the fun part is it's never really done. You should always be sort of changing and figuring out who you are today. But if that's your whole identity, you don't have that purpose, then, outside of this immediate goal, right? If you describe your whole life purpose as like a quantitative thing or something that isn't about impacting others, then what happens when you accomplish it? Because again, it's the satisfaction, fulfillment comes from striving toward this great purpose and the impact you have and the totality of your impact. That's where fulfillment comes from, right? We think it's from the ultimate accomplishment. If you accomplish that and you're 40, now what?
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we are joined by author, former Green Beret, and leadership coach, Sean Patton. Sean, thanks for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's going to be fun.
Well, let's start off the conversation by finding out a little bit more about you. Who is Sean Patton?
So I am someone who is passionate about leadership and passionate about empowering others to achieve a fulfilling and meaningful life. And I found kind of throughout my years, different ways to do that. Obviously, nobody comes to, that conclusion just right off the bat, right? There's been struggles and, different avenues, but that's really what, in the last few years, I've come to find that's sort of where my passion and purpose have really aligned, is using the skill sets and using some of the unique experiences I have to share insights with others that are trying to maximize this whole experience of life and its craziness and everything involved.
So you talk about unique experiences. You were, I guess, almost all of your adult life, you spent in the military, or the majority of it, correct?
Yeah, from 18 to 32.
Okay. So yeah, just let us know a little bit more of those experiences and the leadership roles that you're in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, 3 weeks out of high school, I went to United States Military Academy at West Point, which is the, America's college that is just for the Army, right? So people get a little confused. There's some different countries and different services and some different military schools. But in the United States, there's 3 actual service academies. There's a Naval Academy in Maryland, the Air Force Academy in Colorado, and then West Point, which is the Army's military academy in New York. So that's kind of the original one. So that was, not your typical college experience, as you can imagine. I wrestled there for 2 years. It's a Division I school. So I was an athlete for the beginning part of it. That really helped shape a lot of the capabilities and sort of thought processes. And what I think that West Point really does very well is it teaches you how to think, right? Because it's not, there's no way academically I couldn't have got into like an Ivy League school or a Harvard or a Princeton, something like that, right? Like they want somebody who's like in a basement somewhere curing cancer, just like some brilliant person. But what West Point's looking for is future leaders, so looking for more of a whole person concept, which really fit the type of development that I was looking for. So, on top of the class schedule is very rigorous, like one semester with less than 20 credit hours, everybody takes calculus 1 through 5. Everybody's taking calculus-based physics by sophomore year. It's a pretty challenging academic course, but it teaches you to prioritize your time and to handle stress and to be resilient when, there's sort of chaos around you and you have 30 hours of things to do and 24 hours in a day. And I think that is obviously very powerful, especially now as an entrepreneur, but future as an officer. So as we get through this, we want to come back to these. I'll kind of go faster through the rest of it. But basically then I commissioned as an infantry officer and spent 10 years as an officer. Basically the first half, I was in the infantry. I was the 101st Airborne Division Light Infantry. And so I was a rifle platoon leader with about 40 soldiers. And then the scout and sniper platoon leader. Spent 14 months in Southwest Baghdad doing both of those roles. And then went to Special Forces selection, got selected, and then spent basically the next 5 in the Green Berets, which is the Army Special Forces. And I was lucky enough to command 2 different teams there. So 12-man detachments, a regular team that I spent some time on the Afghan-Pakistan border, and then an underwater infiltration team or a combat dive team. So I got to do some underwater special operations stuff, and I got out in 2015.
So now, serving in some of those leadership roles, I'm sure we can imagine some of the ways that they would differ from your traditional business leadership roles, but what are some of the similarities?
So, if I could on that, I'm going to scale out even more.
Okay.
As a leader I'll definitely answer that, but with soldiers or in the civilian world or with people in Canada or the United States or Afghanistan or Iraq or Lebanon or wherever else, one thing that my experience in totality taught me was, yes, there's some cultural differences, there's some different ideologies, some different values, some different thoughts about kind of what's the best way to live. But at the end of the day, we're all the same. That's really sort of the underlying theme, I think, of the entire experience. And that's what it really opened up for me was, the difference between military and civilian leadership. Definitely there's some key differences and some key similarities, but even just, this side of the world and that side of the world, and you start realizing we're, 95% alike. And although the world tends to highlight that 5% difference, in reality, we want to have an opportunity to, succeed. If we want to be able to work harder and see rewards from our work. We want a safe place to raise our family. We want to have purpose. We want to have community, and we want to know that if we do work, we're going to be provided for by our government and our community. So that's, what I found in leadership in both places, but just as human beings, is that we're way more alike than different. Some of the similarities, though, is, it really comes down to communication and purpose. And that's something that I find some businesses do struggle with. Some business leaders don't recognize that, their view, their values, their incentives, their mission is different than an employee's, and they can't make that switch. And so the real key, I think, in terms of the similarities is the communication, taking care of people, and servant leadership. At the end of the day, you have to show that trust and respect goes down in an organization before it ever comes back up. Too many leaders think, well, they work for me, so they should just respect and trust me automatically. That's not the way it works. You have to give that to your subordinates, and you have to earn it back as a leader. And that's exactly the same between the two. Both organizations have to be mission driven, right? We can't, just the budget or some experience or a profit be the sole purpose of an organization. People want to be a part of an organization that is accomplishing something that they feel is important and impactful in the world. And when you do that, they will do anything for you. And then all of a sudden, the small things about incentive pay or benefits or how much time they get off, they'll ignore if you can align them with the organization's purpose and mission and get them personally aligned with that. So those are two of the things that I think are really, really similar.
Sounds good. Now, another thing that you said there was, we're more similar than we are different, which kind of makes me want to ask another question. And I have my own views on this, which are probably against the grain. But in terms of one of the things that we hear a lot of is, how do you manage millennials? How do you manage millennials differently than other people? Now, my views on this are probably against the grain. What are your thoughts on managing millennials or anybody else for that matter?
So I think the generational divide comes because I think about this, and when I think about systems and different stuff like that, I'm one of those people I like to rip away the surface, right? Like I'm not a small talk type person. And I think we get in the weeds with all this. Well, when you said this, and it's just like, we're all talking about, one of my favorite phrases, right? We're all talking about symptoms and not underlying causes, right? So I think at the end of the day, if you look at sort of the millennial generation versus maybe the Gen X or boomer generation, is those a little older generations tend to see work as work, and that the fruits of that work, you work hard, you get compensated for it, and then you use the fruits of that labor to live the life that you want to live. And you work harder and you kind of like suffer in the moment to be able to create, additional resources so that you can take care of your family, you can go vacation, you can enjoy life on this side of that. And I think that the differing opinion with sort of the millennials, and they define this Gen Y, which is kind of like a micro generation. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's like, that's where I am. It's like, 78 to 84, 5-ish. Right. And I was born in 83. So I'm kind of right there in terms of like, we didn't, I mean, maybe you guys are about the same age. I don't know. We're like,
that's us.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't grow up with cell phones. We didn't grow up with the internet. We just left, hey, come back before, the sun goes down. Right. So we had that sort of experience versus, but also, then by the time we were in our early 20s, sort of our whole working life has been around technology. So I feel like I've got, you guys, these two kind of like a foot in both camps to a certain extent. But I think what it comes down to, and personally, I think this difference is as a positive progress for society, is we want our work to be meaningful too. And I put myself in that camp, right? Like we don't want to just go to work and suffer in order to make money to then go, retire early or go on vacations 2 weeks. We want to go and be excited about what we're doing all the time. And so it sort of blurs this work-life balance, which is something that I, subscribe to as well, right? It's like, there's no work life and personal life, man. There's just life, you're choosing what you're doing with it. And so try to like divide it up and be like, well, yeah, I hate my life 8 hours a day, but that's my work life. Like, who wants to do that? That's such a big part of your life. So, and I think that some of the older generation doesn't really understand that, because they see that as like an entitlement perspective, and sort of like, well, they want to be given this. They don't want to work hard. Like, no, but I deal with this a lot because I'm in the leadership space, right? So a lot of the senior leaders with sort of boomers and Gen Z workers now. And what I try to explain to them is kind of what I was talking before, is like, you just have to communicate the why. Like you have to tell them, why they're coming to work and why they should work hard. And if you do that, you'll get harder workers, right? Because they're not just in it for the paycheck now, but it takes sort of an additional layer of understanding and empathy and emotional intelligence from leadership.
It's so true what you say, right? Because I'm thinking back to like my grandparents and that age group. Those guys started a job and retired at that job, right? And now today it's like, hey, if you're not happy with what you're doing, go and do something else, right? Yeah. But then, and that's great because like you said, it is, you're not, it's your personal life and work life. So if 8 hours of that day you are miserable, hey, why not go and try something new? But then also, I guess in the leadership end, it's like, what are the leaders doing to try to retain and keep some of these employees, right? So it's that.
Well, absolutely. And they're calling, this whole sort of mass exodus, if you guys have probably termed, the great resignation, right? So that's what the term that they're on, is this great resignation. But, it's interesting because I actually spoke at a conference closer to you guys up in Cleveland, Ohio in May. And it was like a commercial construction thing, but they wanted me to talk about how you get and retain veterans, right? They want more military service members in their organizations. And, part of it was, hey, you go talk to these bases, you fill out these forms, you learn stuff. But really, I was like, at the end of the day, you have to realize these soldiers are coming out with a certain expectation of leadership, right? They've seen what solid leadership looks like. They've probably seen some bad leadership too, but they've seen some pretty strong leadership. They've seen what strong leadership development programs look like. They've seen what a mission-oriented organization looks like. And it's one thing to recruit those types of people, but then to retain them. And I don't think it's that much different than what we're talking about with millennials, right? If you want to, really with anyone, if you want to recruit and retain the best, yeah, you're going to talk about compensation. Yeah, you're going to talk about benefits and those types of things. But it's really going to come down to, if you want to keep them, people don't leave jobs, right? Because necessarily just because of pay or whatever, they leave leaders, they leave managers, they leave bad culture, right? If you have a great culture and they love who they work for and you're looking out for their best interests, and you have a great relationship and they're driven and they see the career path forward, like, you're not losing those people. Those people aren't leaving those jobs. So I just think it's a little bit of this transition period. And I think it's a combination of, right, some of our, like my grandparents, I'm sure your grandparents, they grew up in the Great Depression. So for them, it was like, they've seen what happens when the bottom drops out. And so it's like, you hold on to your job and you just do your work because, hey, you got food on the table, which I totally get. Right. And we've been, privileged enough to not have to live through something quite as serious. And then I also think that another sort of the technological revolution has changed things a lot, right? Because we can have this conversation now, like, I'm an entrepreneur, you guys are entrepreneurs. We can start on things, and we've got, my phone's across, I can hold my phone out, but we've got people in their 20s with their phone, that are making $1 million a year off the thing in their pocket, as we're like, that wasn't a thing before, right? Like if you wanted to have a podcast or a radio show, you would write a script, you'd go do your time at a DJ station, you would put concepts up, and then hopefully you like the person liked you and their boss, and they would allow you to have airtime. And, so it's created this meritocracy and this idea that, I don't need to serve someone else to be fulfilled or to make money, right? The reality is, the thing that all of us have in our pocket, that could be your whole career, and you could do anything you want, sell anything you want, get your message out. You could be an artist. You don't have to go to the label and the radio station. You just throw some stuff on SoundCloud, and if it's good, you're good, right? Like so it's just it gives a different empowerment to more people through technology.
Now, one of the other things you mentioned too was time management. What are some good ideas or some good practices, I guess, just to develop some good time management habits and skills, really?
So it all starts for me with defining your purpose. Like, what are you really trying to accomplish, right? So, and, in my book, I kind of lay out like a four-step process for this, but we go real quickly, but, start with your values. What are your beliefs? And you write those out. So, it could be, the golden rule. I think everyone should treat others how they want to be treated. I think everyone should have equal opportunity in this, to succeed. I think we should strive to live in harmony with the earth, or whatever, your values are, right? Then I have people do a worldview assessment. And I've been through so many different ways, like how do you define a worldview? Because if you're going to replicate a framework, you have to have a system within it. I can't have one person be like, my worldview is this painting, and one person make a bullet list and one person write an essay, right? So I have people use a standard SWOT assessment like we use in business, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, but do it for the world and whatever they want. If they want to look globally, if they want to look in their community, their family, whatever sort of matters to them as their worldview. And so, hey, what when you look out, what do you think is the strength of their community, the world around you? What are the opportunities we have in front of us as a world? What are our weaknesses, and what are the threats to those values in the worldview that you have? And then what I find is that when we sort of overlay, these are the things that matter to me, these are my values, how I think people should live, and this is my SWOT assessment of where we are in my worldview, you start to identify, oh, well, I believe this and I think there's an opportunity there, or I believe this and it's a weakness, or there's a threat that I want to be part of addressing, right? You can start assigning where you want to be long-term. And it has to be big and bold. And it's about legacy and impact, right? In the future. It's not something it's really nothing you can say, yes, I've done it, right? I think what I call a Northstar, that good purpose is really only evaluated when you're taking your last breath on your deathbed. You sit down and you think about your whole life and you flash this for you, and you either smile and be like, I did it, or you didn't, right? And that allows you to always have a guiding light for your entire life that can drive your decisions, because you can manage, time, but before we can even get to, well, what should I be doing with my time? We need to decide, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Right? If we don't know where you're headed, then I can teach you how to run Google Calendar, but that doesn't mean you're going to be fulfilled, So I think that comes first, right? And then I have this, the 6 keys of greatness is a framework that's in order within the book. So, first, the third one is the North Star. The fourth one is self-discipline, and self-discipline is where we're getting to time management, right? So once you have that down, then what you can do is find out what are your seasonal priorities. So, you can look at sort of long-term, medium-term goals and say, all right, in this season of life, what am I going to accomplish right now? And know that they're nested underneath. They're all guided toward where you're headed for a lifetime. But what does that mean in terms of action right now? So before you ever look at a calendar, you ever look at anything else, you write out, and these are my seasonal priorities, right? And I encourage people to do like around 5, like 3 to 7 is good. Okay, you can't have 20 priorities. It's not everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? So find out what are your priorities, okay, and then you go to your calendar and you put in any hard times, right? Hard times, things that you can't control. Soft times are things you can't control. So, if you've got kids and they've got to be at school at 8, they got to be at school at 8, right? They've got soccer at this time, they got soccer this time. If your boss says you got a meeting here, you got a meeting here. So you fill that in. Then whatever's left over, right? You start blocking out your time based on your priorities. So if one of your priorities is, professional development, make sure you have time there for professional development. If you know that one of your times is to, mentor those people underneath you in your organization, make sure you put time in there to do that. Right. And you can be broad with these sort of block time. There's different methods to do block timing. It's kind of all over, but it's not just block timing to me. It's block times that are for the things that you said are most important to you, that are your priorities. And I do that first. And then once that's done, then you can actually look at your to-do list. And then you start filling that in as you go, right? Okay, I know I've got time to this, time to that. But that way, as you fill in your to-do list, you're accomplishing things for time management that are actually driving you forward, right? Because so many people, are prioritizing their schedule instead of scheduling their priorities. So they're saying, oh, here's my 20 things. What do I need to do first? And you get all 20 things done. And that's when we get, we've all had those days and weeks where we get done. We're like, God, that was a long week. What did I do? What did I accomplish? Like, are you any closer to your goal? Or did you do fulfilling work? Have you developed your important relationships and everything else? And so I like to run through that and then, have some flexibility within that framework. And there's some tips and tricks within that as well. Make sure you stick with it, but have some flexibility built in. But that's the foundation to me. Again, it comes back to making sure that you have time to do the work that is meaningful to you is going to drive you forward in your goals, whether they're personal, relational or financial or professional.
I was listening to an interview that you were on, and you were saying you look at somebody's schedule and it's all works related. And it's like, well, where's your time, that you want to spend with your family and, your hobbies and stuff like that. And it's so true because like you said, those hard times and then the soft, right? And I think a lot of people put those hard times, air quotations, down first because yes, it is what you have to get done. But then, like you said, you feel like, what did I really accomplish this week? And then that's where that draining feeling comes in. That's where, they're feeling overwhelmed, all those things. And then people, what do they want to do? They just want to give up because they're feeling empty. They're not feeling fulfilled by all the extras, right?
Yeah. All those things that really matter. And that's what I found, it's interesting you bring that point up because yeah, exactly. That's what I found a lot, especially with, very senior people. So the more senior I work with, the more I see this be a problem, which is surprising. Right. And that's actually sort of the impetus for the book, because I do with organizations, I have an elite leadership workshop and I run them through and kind of has modules, right? Self-leadership, servant leadership, organizational leadership, strategic planning. And as I started doing that, and especially as I worked with more and more companies, bigger companies, more senior people, I would accompany that with intermittent, one-on-one counseling. And what I would find is, we're talking about them wanting to be leaders of other humans, right? Not managers, right? Not checking metrics, KPIs and doing all that, but actually leading other human beings to be their best selves. But their home life is garbage, right? Like their kids won't even talk to them, right? They're miserable. They drink every day just to go home. They're in terrible health. They don't feel good. And so all these things, it's like, well, and so that's where I was like, I kind of almost pumped the brakes, work with my business coach at the beginning of this year, because I started bringing this problem up. And, the first part of self-leadership is sort of this mindset piece, but it was like a small sliver of this leadership training. And what I started finding was like, these leaders they're not ready. Like they're, don't get me wrong. They're leading, 200 locations and they've got but in their minds, they can't go any further until they re-pour their foundation and make it stronger. And that's where I was like, okay, I need to spend some more time developing out this mindset framework in a very executable and detailed and closed system way, because I also, when I put things together, I don't like loose ends, right? So I'm the person who in a conversation, I may not say, or in a group, I may not say that much, but the whole time I'm thinking through the different sides and the counter arguments. And then by the time I say something, I already have my 5-paragraph format with an intro, 3 main points, a counterpoint, a conclusion, before the thought comes out, right? So that's kind of how I was I felt like I needed to almost pump the brakes on this leadership workshop and then leadership training. And I really needed to solidify so that when I did, so I could provide this, a solid and complete framework that I know to literally solve human discontent. And so that's what kind of drove me back to this, was exactly what you're talking about, where people are you're working, you're spinning your wheels, right? But, that's what happens when people set their goal of their whole work life. It's like, well, I want to buy a vacation home. Okay, cool. They buy a vacation home. They're like sitting in it. They're happy for like a month. And I'm like, well, I'm still empty. I'm still not happy. Okay. Well, then I'll need a second vacation home. Now I need a yacht. Now I need, I need a younger girlfriend. I need a brand new car. I need what I need the next promotion. And every single time they hit that, they strive and empty. Right. But what they're forgetting is that, I use a sort of a sports reference here, right? It's like, think about like, I don't know, like Michael Jordan. I don't really follow much basketball, but Michael Jordan back in the day, right? Like when he was at his prime, he's working, he's going and he's winning, and everything is just about winning championships, and he's probably never been happier in his life, right? Everything is purpose driven and fulfilled. And then people say, well, what people forget is that, once that championship, like the trophy doesn't matter. You can go buy a trophy. Right. It's not about that. It's about the process and the struggle. That's what's rewarding, right? The process and the impact in your life and the purpose is what's rewarding. It's not the end goal. And so people sacrifice the process because they think the end goal, they think a dollar amount or a position or some sort of recognition is what's going to make them satisfied. And then they skip and they waste the most precious part, which is the process, because at the end of the day, the process is life. None of us win life. We're all going in the ground, right? So the only thing that matters is the process. So if you're not in love with the process, then you're not in love with life.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned Michael Jordan too, because he was really driven by the accomplishment. The one thing is every time he won a ring, every time he won a championship, so he was holding up the amount of fingers. Like if you watch the celebrations, he's holding up the amount of fingers for the next one. When he won his second title, he's holding up 3 fingers because he's already thinking about the next one.
Yeah. And what I think that the Northstar does, right? When I thought about this, having that big life purpose, thinking about legacy, right? Is that you get to live your life like Michael Jordan in his prime, chasing that next championship for your whole life. Right. And you see this with athletes, right? Who define themselves just by that, and they get out and they're lost, right? We see it with soldiers all the time. That's one of the reasons we have such an issue with soldiers, on top of the PTSD and suicide and depression. But a lot of it comes from just like their whole identity was that thing, right? And then it's not that anymore. And I'll tell you, it's super weird. I mean, I thought the transition, it'll be a month or two. I mean, I think I'm still transitioning. I've been out for 6 years. Because it is a whole rediscovery, after 14 years, my entire adult life. And then to be like, well, who is Sean? Not Captain Patton, but who's Sean? And, I'm still sort of in that self-discovery phase. And I think what I'm starting to find is that you will find like a base, but the fun part is it's never really done. You should always be sort of changing and figuring out who you are today. But if that's your whole identity, you don't have that purpose, then, outside of this immediate goal, right? If you describe your whole life purpose as like a quantitative thing or something that isn't about impacting others, then what happens when you accomplish it? Because again, it's the satisfaction, fulfillment comes from striving toward this great purpose and the impact you have and the totality of your impact. That's where fulfillment comes from, right? We think it's from the ultimate accomplishment. If you accomplish that and you're 40, now what? Right. So that's why, and in the book, I go into, when I started researching this concept and again, trying to put some solid structure around it, that was logically, philosophically, and, from a science perspective when it's funny, where this whole thing started was me playing fetch with my Labrador Retriever with Java, because I was going through, when I first business, I started right out of, I got in the military, I started business school and it failed. I mean, I went through a bankruptcy. I've been through a failed business and it's one of the hardest things I've done in my life. And I was going through that and nothing was working. I was throwing the ball for Java. She'd go get it and bring it back. I'll bring it back. And as the whole time, she's cheering me up because I'm depressed, but she's just happy and ecstasy the whole time. And I just remember thinking like, man, that must be nice, like it must be nice to just be like, I'm good. This is all I need is chasing this ball and bring it back. And I'm happy. And so let me think of like, well, what is my ball? What is ours as humans? Like, what is our ball? What's our thing that does that? And it started me in this trying to, go deep. And, the theory I came up with, which is part of the Northstar theory, is every living creature, plants, animals, humans, doesn't matter, is its happiest, content, and fulfilled when its activities and environment are aligned with its genetic purpose. It goes all the way back, because at the end of the day, right, Java is yes, some from selective breeding and that sort of stuff, but then, from evolutionary perspective, then selective breeding primarily, right? We've made, after generation of generation, a thing that is designed at the cellular level to get stuff and bring it back and be happy about it. Right? Like that's what she is. That's what she is. Mm-hmm. And so like, who are we designed to be? And if you look at it, historically, right, we're social creatures. So you can't, if you put a human being by itself, him or herself, they deteriorate and die mentally and physically. So that right there proves to you that we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be in groups. And then it makes sense if you think it from an evolutionary perspective, right? Because why did the Homo sapiens over other hominids that were alive at the time as well survive? Well, we developed this unique sense in our brain for advanced communication, and that led to coordination and led to bigger communities being able to work together for common defense, to go get food, right? I'll watch the kids, you go get food. I'll defend here while you sleep, right? Like we work together, and that's what allowed us to, really evolve into the societies we have. And unfortunately, we've almost hit this breaking point where all of a sudden now we've almost don't recognize that sometimes. Right. So we, especially in, Western societies, like we're in, here in the North America, they're individualist societies, and don't be wrong. I believe, the individual rights and human, all those things, I'm not saying we should all like live in a giant, collective with no rights, but we have to recognize that we're designed to live in a collective. That's how we're designed. So we have to alter our thoughts and behaviors to more closely align to that, that sentiment. And so that's why to find your ball, which I call the Northstar, to find that, right, it has to be about impacting others. So when you define your Northstar, it can't be buy this boat, buy this house, this thing for me, this thing for me. Like all the marketing messages will tell you that that's how where happiness comes from, right? That you buy the new Jeep and all of a sudden you're fulfilled for your life, right? As you drive through the mountainside in California. It's not true. What we get real satisfaction, right, is when we give to others and we're strive toward a purpose that provides value to others. And when we do that, we find fulfillment and contentment. And it shouldn't be that big of a surprise, because it's why we are who we are. It's who we are at the genetic level. We're designed to live in that tribe or that group of people and help each other. So that's how our reward system in our brain and the chemical reward system is based off that.
And it's interesting, right? Because it still doesn't always come as natural to us. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's that we just don't prioritize that, right? But as you're wrapping up that piece, I'm also thinking of all the times that, I'm just going to throw out some random things. You volunteered, you've made a meal for somebody, like all that kind of stuff. You may not want to do it in that moment, but then when it's done, you feel like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. I see how that benefited that person. I see how it benefited me, but it doesn't always come natural, because we could always fill our calendars and our times with so much other stuff, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what it comes from, the fact that our environment, and what how we're designed to live is not the way we're living. And so we found ways, it's interesting. I was watching a documentary. I'm obsessed with Netflix series Explained. Have you guys watched that? If you have to, you need to. It's awesome. Oh, I'll sit there and watch it, all Sunday on a day off or something. But they've got one on. So they pick a topic, and I just top of mind because my wife and I watched a couple of days ago on sugar, and what it talks about is, this is the kind of exactly what we're talking about. In our natural environment, sugar came from, the energy and calories were hard to find, and that was the most dense form of immediate energy was in fruits and nuts and stuff like that had these sugars in it. And so that's how we evolved. So we're designed to live in a place where that's the environment, and that's why our reward system is built that way. And then very recently, in the last 100 or 200 years, we figured out how to extract that sugar and put it into everything else, and now we're killing ourselves with it. Right. So it's sort of the same thing here of our body is designed, our brain chemicals are designed for this one environment. And that's what got us to this point. But now we found ways to hijack it with social media likes and, sugar-filled food and, retail therapy and, everything else. Right. And so we're hijacking it. And so that's why it takes a conscious effort to see that objectively, pull yourself back from it, and become the master of your reward system. You have to recognize what drives you and then make a decision objectively separate from it to do things that are going to drive to ultimate fulfillment that sort of align with what it was designed to do. Because if you don't, and you just sit here and wait for it to tell you what to do, because we found ways to hijack it, it's going to get you all discombobulated, right? And you're going to be a dopamine and serotonin drug addict, right? Stuck to the couch or playing video games or doing whatever. And so we have to have the maturity to step back and sort of realign and take back our environment for our own health.
So I want to switch gears and talk about communication. So you wrote on your website about the 5 Bravo communication method.
Yeah.
And you were saying how this can be applied in your professional life as well as your personal.
Yeah.
Are you able to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up with this when I was in the military, and it's sort of a couple different doctrines that I've pulled together to make it as succinct as possible. Because you can imagine, in business, right? Time is money. So being efficient is very important. But in the military, good communication and time is life. So it's even more important and stressed to have clear, concise communication. And so I started, realizing that I would give, I used to call this the 5 Bravo components of an order, but people in business like to hear about ordering other people. So now it's the communication method, right? We softened it a bit. But, when you give an order or you ask someone to do something, I found like, okay, I feel like they're not meeting my expectations, but I know that 1, they know how to do it. And 2, they're not purposely not meeting expectations. So something's wrong here, right? Something's missing from the way that I think about something in my brain, and I'm trying to get it in their brain, exact same replica copy, and it's not happening. So what I came up with this 5 Bravo communications order, and it goes task, right? Which is simply like what you want them to do. Okay. Purpose, why you want them to do it, how it impacts the environment around you, right? Give them that larger perspective of why we're accomplishing this. Then intent, which intent for something small, like a routine activity, like doing a quarterly report or something like that, could be almost nothing, but because this is the how, or if this is a whole new business venture or a new project or some complex system, this could be the biggest part of the order, right? And it's things like resources available, constraints, right? There might be regulations on why they have to do something a certain way, right? There may be, hey, I'm going to give you a team of 3 marketing people to work on this. I'm going to give you a coder. I'm going to give you time, whatever resources you're going to give them, whatever constraints, the variables are there. And then anything that goes to how you want it accomplished. But I put that caveat in that we want to give as little as possible. Like you want the intent, you want the how to be as succinct and minimal as possible, because otherwise we're micromanaging, right? And we're not hiring robots, we're hiring people. And what you want is them as much as possible to come up with the how, because they're closer to the problem. That's how you get innovation. That's how you get new ideas, right? Is you are empowering people to just say, look, this is what I want done, but you figure out how. And by them having to problem solve and do that, you're developing them as a subordinate. So kind of a caveat to that. So we're at task, what you want done, purpose, why you want it done, intent, how you want it done, right? And then you have end state. So that's when this whole thing's done and you come back and you're like, did it, boss? What's it look like? Right? I mean, what's that look like? What impact did you have? What form is this thing in, right? What was done? What looks like success to you? And very clearly define that. The 5th one is timeline. And that's the one a lot of people mess up, right? Because if you say, we want you to, I need you to get this thing back to me when you get a chance, and it's not on the desk the next day, right? That's not on you. You just hadn't have time yet. So being very specific about like timeline is a specific date and time. And if there's intermediate timelines that have to be met, you need to give those as well. So very specific with time is something that I'm huge on in all communications. So that's your 5, right? Then you have the Bravo, which is back brief. So that's, when you get done, you say, all right, what I just asked you to do. And you get it back. Now, if you establish, it depends on your relationship with that person, right? I talk about this in your personal and professional life. I don't, advise you going to, your wife and being like, what'd I just tell you? It's not going to go over well. For personal experience, don't try that. But you can soften that, right, with different people and say, hey, look, I probably missed something. Like, there was a lot of stuff there. Can you tell me what you got to make sure that I gave you all the information you need, right? So it doesn't have to be as like direct as like, tell me what I told you. But you'll find almost every time that they're missing something, or you forgot something, or they added something, right? Or there's some detail you forgot. So it's so powerful, because the reason I say, that this is one of the most powerful things you can implement in your organization and personal and professional life immediately, is because communication failures are, if not the major cause or the fault of every sort of business failure, they're a contributing factor in basically every failure and in every issue that comes up in marriage, right? or with your kids or anything else, for the most part, it's like, and that's how I think about it. If you have a good organization, the fact is you probably don't have someone who was just like, knew exactly what you wanted and was like, nah, not going to do that. It's probably not the case. So if you don't do that, right? So the first thing that happens in my companies, in my units back when I was in the military, is if someone didn't meet my expectation, is before I, got onto them, or I said anything, I just stopped and thought, like, did I give them the whole 5 Bravo? Did I give it to them? And if I didn't, I got to take that one on the chin, right? That's on you as the leader, that you failed to effectively communicate what you wanted. And that's an opportunity for you to apologize and then learn and do better next time, right? That's a learning opportunity for you. But if you did, then the leadership decision becomes binary, becomes very easy, right? Either 1, that person needs more training to accomplish what you needed to accomplish, or 2, they've had the training and they're not capable of it, and they need to be moved into a different position, or maybe they need to leave the organization, right? But that's a leadership decision that you can't even make if you didn't give them all 5 of those components, right? And I've thought, believe me, years and years about, can I make it any smaller, right? I mean, it used to be long, and I keep coming back with no. There's each component there is so critical that I think you're at sort of the bare bones of what is an effective ask of someone, what is an effective communication when you want someone to do something that you have an idea of. And so that's the 5 Bravo, and that's why it's so powerful, because if you do it every time, it allows you to make immediate decisions within your organization of, okay, cool, we need more training for this person, or this person can't do what we need them to do. So we either need to move that task to someone else or move them to a new place in the organization.
Okay. Thanks for breaking that down.
Yeah, no problem.
Guys, now we introduced you as an author, and we keep referring to the book, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to talk to us about the book itself.
Yeah. So, we kind of talked about, a little bit ago, like the impetus for it, like how it came from. And I was doing these workshops, and I realized I need to really, I think, tighten up this mindset portion and get it out to people. And so, it's called the Warrior's Mindset. And, I've gotten some pushback on that from people, right? Like, we're like, I don't want to be a warrior. We're promoting violence and fighting, all that stuff. But that's not what we're talking about now. Because the way I look at it is, a warrior is someone who fights or strives for a cause, right? It doesn't have to be a physical, violent conversation, right? It could be a struggle over ideology, right? They have a belief in something, the way something should be, and they're willing to put an effort and struggle for it. And they find purpose in that struggle. And so that's what a warrior is to me. And I believe you can't, you're either a warrior or you're a victim, right? Because you're either fighting to try to change things the way you want it to be, or you're accepting them and you're just like, well, you tell me what to do, right? That's it. There's no in between, right? There's no homeostasis in business or in life, right? You're either getting smarter or dumber. Your muscles are either getting stronger or weaker. Like that's just the way it is. Like there's no life and the world doesn't work like that, right? Put a piece of wood outside, right? You either reinforce it and it gets stronger, you build something with it, or it deteriorates away. Like there's no steady state. And people are always looking for that sort of like steady state. Well, I just want to chill here. Like, all right, well, enjoy it right now, because in 1 second it's over. now it's the next second, right? So anyway, that's what that warrior means to me. And so what I set out to do was set a complete framework that, again, is a solution to human discontent, and had enough of a framework that it was universal for everyone, but had enough freedom within it that people with varying values, varying cultural identities, varying skill sets, education could pick it up and use it. And that's a hard thing to do, to find the balance between enough structure that, it can be replicated, but not so strict that it doesn't become universal. So I came up with the 6 keys to greatness, and how I define greatness is living a life with fulfilled, with contentment, and ultimately transcendence, right? I think that's sort of, people thought enlightenment or transcendence. Like when you get to that point, that's, what else do you want from life other than living with a purpose-driven, content, fulfilled, excited about every single second, and being proud of how you're doing it. Now, within that, obviously, sometimes, you could be happy, you could be sad, there's grief, there's disappointment, but those are all temporary things. But you have this backbone of sort of this oneness around you. And I think that's what greatness is. And so there's the 6 keys. The first one is perspective and gratitude. And that's about adjusting your perspective about yourself and about the world, and then bringing gratitude to top of mind. So when you do that, when you have a gratitude lens on everything that happens around you, and you actually think and appreciate about how amazing and how privileged the life we lead is, right? And so I have these seven fuels of gratitude, and, we need to go through all of them, but they're things like, your known foundation, right? The people that in your life. None of us are self-made, right? None of us came out of the womb, we're like ready to be a CEO. So we've had parents, teachers, mentors, coaches, clergymen, whoever, that have sacrificed, friends, for us to be here. We have an unknown foundation of people we don't know. We talk about it from a historical perspective, right? So just one example from that is, I use in the book, is the child mortality rate in the United States. So in 1800, which is only like 3 lifetimes ago, right? The child mortality rate, so death rate under 5, was 47%. So can you imagine living in a world where in your subdivision, every person that had 4 kids, 2 of them died on average? That was the world they lived in, right? So we take little things like that. And I use an example from some of my friends that we lost overseas and their sacrifice. And when you start seeing everything through that lens, it does give you this unlimited energy source where you keep driving forward, because how could you not, right? And it takes the minutia of life that we get stressed and wrapped up and anxious about, and be like, it's not, I just drove in a car. You know how cool a car is? Car is awesome, right? You got air conditioning. I hit a button. I'm like, I'm chilly. Boom, hit a button. It's 2 degrees warmer. That's amazing. Are you kidding me? Like, what are you stressing about? That's, if someone's listening to this right now, they've got a roof over their head, they've got internet, they've got more food than they can healthily eat, and they've got probably every opportunity to accomplish a sustainable lifestyle for themselves. So that's amazing. So perspective and gratitude is number 1. That's your fuel. Second is internal locus of control. And that's about harnessing your power, right? We have to take ownership of our lives in the present moment, because there's a difference between fault and responsibility. And while bad things might happen to us, trauma, circumstances, education, all those things can happen to us, but all those things are in the past, and it's not our fault. It's definitely not completely our fault for the circumstances we're in, right? Everyone's in different places, and everyone's reality is different. But right now in the moment, what you do or don't do, what action you take now is your responsibility. And so we have to kind of own that. And that's the internal locus of control, harnessing the power. Next is the Northstar theory. We've talked a lot about that, right? That's the direction we're headed. Then the 4th one is self-discipline, right? So that's the execution piece, okay? Because we can have all the hopes and dreams and we know exactly where we're headed, but if we don't have the tactics, the techniques, and the tools to build ourselves up to actually execute and take advantage of the time and energy we have, we're not going to get to where we want to be. We're not going to feel fulfilled. And the next one is perseverance. So, when I tell people, it's like, look, when you go through this process and you go away from like, I want a vacation home, or I want a garage on my house, or, I just want 2 happy kids, to, I've decided this is how I'm going to change the world. You better be ready to persevere, because that's going to be hard, right? You're going to struggle, and not just struggle with the hard times, but struggle with apathy, because that's what gets most of us, right? So what it gets most of us is that young, driven, we're going to do this, we're going to conquer the world, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden we have a few kids and we get a nice house and we get a mortgage and we get a car payment and we get kind of comfortable and we like the TV and we got to be, and all of a sudden, and then we kind of coast. And then all of a sudden we're 60, 70 and we look back and we're like, I didn't accomplish what I could have, because I got apathetic in the middle, because of those short-term gratification reward systems that we got caught up with. So perseverance and building mental resiliency. And I talk about some ways that in special operations, we would use stress inoculation training to build up our mental toughness and resiliency. And the first 5 there are about you, right? Because now you're back at perspective and gratitude. And hopefully you've got a new perspective, new gratitude. You can fill that up again, more energy, and you just keep refining that process as an individual level. But I used to stop at 5, but I think the 6, which is leadership, is important, because leadership is about amplification, because we only have so much time, so much energy to dedicate toward these goals. And our lifetime is very short. But if you look at every major impact that has happened with humanity, good and bad, it's about leadership. So it all kind of circles back to this communal factor of, if you really want to accomplish your true potential for greatness and your vision, you need to be able to communicate that and get people and influence others to buy off, to sort of all get in line and push forward. And that completes the 6 keys to greatness. And to me, that is living with a warrior's mindset.
Awesome. Now, we've talked a lot about some ways to be successful in business and in life. So I want to kind of ask a probably counterintuitive question, but do you have a favorite failure?
Favorite is a hard one to put in front of failure, huh? Maybe most impactful, failure or something. I've got a ton, right? And I would, I'll go right, to some of the biggest ones. I give my biggest ones personally and professionally. So, personally, when I was in the military, I was married before, and I just got back from Afghanistan. I don't think, I was a different person in terms of my mental state. Afghanistan for me was a pretty violent deployment. And so you live like that for a while, you come back and you sort of seek chaos as it's almost like someone who grew up in an abusive household, right? They tend to find and be comfortable if things can't be too right, because then they don't know what's going to happen. They're more comfortable in sort of the pain and the suffering. And anyway, got involved in a relationship I shouldn't have, against advice from everyone, and ended up in an abusive relationship emotionally. I'd never really been around someone who came from sort of a broken home and had other issues. I didn't even know what hit me. I was in my late 20s, but I'd never been exposed to that. And that was super hard. And then also, you think of it like marriage, right? It's like the one relationship in your whole life that you're supposed to succeed at. And here I was, successful in all these things, and I couldn't get the most important thing right. And so I went through a divorce, and emotionally and verbally and slightly physically abusive relationship. And that was a wake-up call to me that I had a lot of emotional intelligence work to do, and a lot of introspection about myself and who I was and how I saw people. And so that was, and now I've been married now for 2 years, been with my wife for almost 7, and never been happier in my life. I didn't even know what I have with my wife right now is possible, and I am definitely, although that was one of the hardest things that happened in my life, I'm definitely a better husband, and I'm better in this relationship because I went through that tough one. And then, professionally, again, my first business failed. So to come right out, and I tackled too much and made some other early business mistakes, grew a gym franchise to 400 members, and we're doing $47,000 a month and still losing money. So obviously you've done something wrong from a business sense. And that was so hard. I went to the hospital, I got stress hives. I had a bunch of other medical issues. I just wouldn't want to quit. But yeah, to come right out and be like, oh, look at him, he's going right for it. He's getting his MBA, he's starting this for a company. Again, is successful in all these areas. And then to have your first business fail and to face your family and face people. And, I lost money, other people's money they invested with me. I lost my own money. I had a bank loan, like to go through that was probably the hardest thing in my life. And again, I wouldn't call it a favorite failure, but I'll tell you that the lessons I learned from that, I think filled in the cracks probably in my foundation mentally, spiritually, and from a business sense, right? I kind of learned some hard lessons, but that's what living intently and with intensely is. You also sort of, if you're going to shoot for the stars, your failures are going to be pretty rough too. But I would rather go that way and learn them that fast, because then that was 3 years turn around. And then 4 years later, I've got a new partners, another business where we do martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and MMA. And we have 4 locations, fastest growing team in the Southeast, and already a multi-million-dollar company. So it's like, you can play it safe and learn the lessons slow, but your outcomes as well are going to, as those lessons come and the failures come over time, it sort of slows it down. And so I think that was, just going for it. I learned those hard lessons really hard, but it solidified it in me and it set a stronger foundation to build even higher.
Awesome. Now, another thing I'm kind of curious about as well, because obviously through all of your experiences, within the military, within the business world, with what you're doing now, you've been able to learn a lot. Now, if you could go back 20 years, give or take, and have a cup of coffee with Sean Patton the day before he heads off to West Point, what would you tell him?
I would tell him that, one, it's going to be harder than you think. And I would tell him, 2, that it's going to be worth it. And I would hopefully be able to convey to have a more open mind than I did at the time. I grew up in a smallish town in the middle of the country, right in Kansas, and pretty uniformly didn't have a ton of exposure, travel. And not that, I grew up, my mom worked in special education. It's not like it was a negative thing, but I also just think when your life experience is narrow, you have a hard time really seeing other people's perspectives and that there's other ways to live. And I'm not sure if there's a way to convey that kind of experiential wisdom, but if I could try to convince my younger self to do that, that's what I would have tried to do.
So you have the book, Sean, just let us know, what are you up to right now and where can we find you online?
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram as Sean Patton Presents. I'm on Facebook, just Sean Patton. It's SEAN and PATTON, and then LinkedIn, all that stuff. My company's called Stronger Leaders, Stronger Profits, and it's strongerleaderstrongerprofits.com. And kind of depends, who you are. The main things I'm doing right now is I'm booking a book tour for next year and promotion, that sort of thing. But the sort of services for individuals, I have a leadership group called Stronger Leaders Society. And so it's a small group coaching. We do some private training. I bring in subject matter experts. We do some accountability. I have a resource center for tools and templates, and that's for entrepreneurs, business owners, or corporate leaders. And so I'm coaching through that group for individuals. And then for organizations, I'm getting back out now with a revamped elite leadership workshop. So virtually or in person, I'm excited to get back to what sort of is my bread and butter, which is this leadership development training. And really what I try to tell companies is if your organization is ready to make a leadership cultural shift, if you're ready to shift your leadership culture to be about servant leadership and less about just management, then this workshop is perfect for you. So that's kind of how I'm serving individuals and organizations right now.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us, Sean. We appreciate it. And we appreciate the insights. There's a lot of good information there.
Thank you guys so much. It was awesome chatting with you. And if I get a chance to come up north for this book tour, I'm gonna hit you guys up.
There you go.
Sounds good. We'll be looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, have a good night, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.
Thank you.